Tobias Merrick pressed his back against the cold metal of his locker at Westfield Technical Academy, trying to become invisible as the morning crowd surged through the hallway. His thin frame, all sharp angles and prominent bones beneath an oversized hoodie, made him look like a scarecrow that had wandered in from the nearby Iowa cornfields. His pale skin and nervous habit of pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose marked him as an easy target. The kind of student who ate lunch alone in the library and volunteered to clean whiteboards just to avoid the chaos between classes. What nobody at Westfield knew was that Tobias spent 4 hours every morning before school in his uncle's converted barn, training in Krav Maga and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His uncle, a former Marine Corps instructor, had been teaching him since he was young, drilling into him not just the techniques, but the discipline to never use them unless absolutely necessary. Real strength, his uncle always said, is knowing you could destroy someone and choosing not to. Tobias carried this philosophy like armor, even when it felt paper-thin against the daily torment. The warning came in the form of cologne, expensive, overwhelming, the kind that announced Brady Hutchinson before he even turned the corner. Brady stood 6'2", with the kind of quarterback build that made college scouts salivate and the kind of cruel smile that made other students scatter. His lieutenants, Derek Vaughan and Tyler Nolan, flanked him like hyenas trailing a lion. Derek had arms like ham hocks and a mean streak wider than the Mississippi, while Tyler compensated for his smaller stature with a vicious tongue that could find anyone's weakness in seconds. "Well, well, look what crawled out of the dumpster." Brady's voice cut through the hallway noise like a chainsaw through butter. Students parted, some stopping to watch, others hurrying past with guilty relief that they weren't today's target. Tobias kept his eyes down, counting the scuffed tiles on the floor. 1, 2, 3 steps to the classroom door. He could make it if he just kept walking. Brady's hand slammed against the locker next to Tobias's head, the metallic bang echoing through the hallway. "I'm talking to you, skeleton boy. Didn't your mama teach you it's rude to ignore people?" "Leave him alone, Brady." The voice belonged to Zara Washington, who had just emerged from the chemistry lab. She was the kind of student who seemed to glow with confidence, editor of the school paper, debate team captain, and possessed of the rare ability to look Brady in the eye without flinching. Her dark skin caught the fluorescent lights as she stood with her arms crossed, her expression daring Brady to continue. Brady's attention shifted, his smile growing wider. "Oh, look who's playing hero. What's wrong, Zara? Got a thing for losers now?" Tobias felt his jaw clench. He could handle their attacks on him, had endured them for months since transferring to Westfield after his parents' divorce. But watching Brady turn his poison on Zara made something dark and protective stir in his chest. She had been the only person to show him genuine kindness, sharing her notes in AP history, inviting him to sit with her study group, treating him like he was worth something. "I've got a thing for basic human decency," Zara shot back. "You should try it sometime." Tyler laughed, an ugly sound. "Maybe she's right, Brady. Maybe we should leave the scarecrow alone. Looks like a strong wind would snap him in half anyway." The bell rang, and teachers began emerging from classrooms, their presence enough to make Brady step back. "This isn't over," he muttered to Tobias before sauntering away, his crew following like a toxic shadow. The pattern established itself over the following weeks with the predictability of Iowa weather, harsh and unforgiving. In the cafeteria, Derek would accidentally knock Tobias's tray, sending food cascading across the floor, while the lunch crowd erupted in laughter and phone cameras captured his humiliation. During PE, Tyler would spike volleyballs at his head with NFL-level force, each impact accompanied by jokes about target practice on the skeleton. The worst incidents happened in the spaces between supervision. In the second-floor bathroom, they cornered him and shoved his head toward the toilet, stopping just short of actual contact, but leaving him shaking with rage and humiliation. Behind the automotive shop building, where teachers rarely ventured, they played their favorite game of accidentally checking him into walls as they passed, each impact carefully calculated to hurt but not leave visible marks. Through it all, Tobias held his uncle's words like a mantra. He could have ended it any time. Brady's arrogant stance left him open for a dozen different takedowns. Derek's size made him slow and vulnerable to joint locks. Tyler's aggression would be his downfall against someone who actually knew how to fight. But Tobias's uncle had drilled into him that violence should never be the first answer, that true warriors chose their battles carefully. His parents' messy divorce had taught him that unleashing anger often destroyed more than it fixed. So he endured, letting his body absorb their pushes and shoves, while his mind catalogued every weakness, every opening, every mistake they made. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in early November, when the Iowa air had turned sharp and cold. Tobias was walking through the parking lot after staying late to work on a robotics project, his mind still buzzing with servo motors and Arduino code. He didn't notice the footsteps until it was too late. The arm came around his throat from behind, Derek's massive forearm pressing against his windpipe with crushing force. Tobias's hands instinctively went to the arm, his training screaming at him to tuck his chin, create space, execute the counter he'd practiced 1,000 times. But Brady appeared in front of him, that cruel smile wider than ever, and Tyler was filming with his phone. "Look at him squirm," Brady laughed, "like a worm on a hook. You know what, Derek? I bet he passes out in less than 30 seconds. The skeleton doesn't have enough meat on him to last longer than that." Tobias could have broken free. Even as his vision started to tunnel, his muscle memory knew exactly how to shift his weight, drop his center of gravity, and send Derek flying over his shoulder. But they were still in the parking lot, still technically on school grounds, and he could see other students gathering, their phones out, ready to capture whatever happened next. If he fought back now, on camera, he'd be the one suspended, the one labeled violent, the one who lost control. The darkness crept in from the edges as Derek tightened his grip. Tobias heard Zara's voice somewhere in the distance, shouting for them to stop, and then the world went black. He woke up on the cold asphalt, his throat raw and burning, to the sound of laughter. It seemed like half the school had gathered in a circle, their phones pointed at him like weapons. Brady stood over him, arms spread wide like a gladiator in the Colosseum. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brady announced, "I present to you Westfield's biggest loser." Guy couldn't even last 20 seconds. The laughter grew louder, cruel and sharp. Tobias could see Zara trying to push through the crowd to reach him, her face twisted with anger and concern. He could see teachers finally starting to notice the commotion from the building. He could see Derek and Tyler high-fiving, celebrating their victory, and something inside Tobias finally snapped. Not broke, snapped. Not. Like a rubber band pulled too tight, like a spring suddenly released, like a storm that had been building pressure until it couldn't be contained anymore. He got to his feet slowly, deliberately, his movements different now. The scared, hunched posture was gone. His shoulders rolled back, his stance widened, his hands hung loose and ready at his sides. Students who knew boxing or MMA from watching UFC recognized the change immediately. This wasn't the same skinny student who'd been their punching bag for months. "Oh, look who's trying to act tough now," Brady laughed, but there was something uncertain in his voice. "What are you gonna do, skeleton? Cry to the principal?" Tobias's voice, when it came, was calm and steady despite his burning throat. "Number, I'm going to give you one chance to walk away." The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Tyler recovered first, stepping forward with his fists raised in what he probably thought was a fighting stance. "You hearing this, Brady? Skeleton boy thinks he's..." Tobias moved like water, like lightning, like every hour of training condensed into 3 seconds of perfect violence. His foot swept Tyler's legs, while his hand guided the bully's momentum, sending him crashing face first into the asphalt. Before Tyler could even process what had happened, Tobias had already shifted to face Derek, who was charging like an enraged bull. The bigger they are, his uncle had always said, the more they rely on size instead of skill. Derek threw a haymaker that would have knocked out a horse if it had connected. Instead, Tobias slipped inside his guard, his elbow driving into Derek's solar plexus with surgical precision. As Derek doubled over, gasping, Tobias grabbed his wrist and shoulder, using the bully's own weight to flip him onto his back with a classic judo throw that rattled the windows of nearby cars. Brady stood frozen, his mouth open, the script completely forgotten. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The skeleton was supposed to stay down, stay weak, stay defeated. Instead, Tobias stood between Brady and his fallen friends, his stance perfect, his breathing controlled, his eyes holding something Brady had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, but absolute certainty. "You want to know something funny?" Tobias said, his voice carrying across the silent parking lot. "I could have done this the first day you pushed me. The first time you knocked my books down, the first time you thought it was hilarious to torment someone just because you could." Brady tried to salvage his reputation with bravado. "You got lucky. You cheap-shotted them. You think you're tough now? Come on then." He rushed forward with the same move that had won him dozens of football tackles and parking lot fights, shoulders low, arms wide, ready to grab and slam. It was a good move against someone who didn't know how to counter it. Against someone who'd spent years learning how to use an attacker's aggression against them, it was suicide. Tobias pivoted, his hand guiding Brady's head down while his knee came up, not to connect, but to stop an inch from Brady's nose, close enough that the bully could feel the wind from the movement. Then Tobias spun behind him, his arm snaking around Brady's throat in the exact same chokehold Derek had used, but with perfect technique this time. "This is what a proper chokehold feels like," Tobias said quietly, his voice only for Brady. "Notice how I'm not actually cutting off your air. I'm pressing on the carotid arteries. You'll be unconscious in 8 seconds if I want you to be. Your friends didn't know what they were doing. I do." Brady's hands clawed at Tobias's arm, panic replacing arrogance. The crowd had gone completely silent, everyone recording but no one intervening. Even the teachers who had finally arrived stood frozen, unsure how to process the complete reversal they were witnessing. "But here's the difference between you and me," Tobias continued, his voice still calm. "I could put you to sleep right now. I could hurt you the way you've hurt me. I could humiliate you in front of everyone the way you've humiliated me every single day. But I won't." He released Brady, shoving him forward just hard enough to make him stumble but not fall. Brady spun around, his face red with a mixture of oxygen deprivation and embarrassment, his fists raised but shaking. "Because I'm not you," Tobias said. "I don't need to hurt people to feel strong. I don't need to tear others down to build myself up. You're already defeated, Brady. You just don't know it yet." Derek was getting to his feet, still wheezing. Tyler was on his hands and knees, blood dripping from his nose where he'd met the asphalt. Both of them looked at Tobias like they were seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, not the projection of weakness they'd created. "You want to know why I never fought back?" Tobias asked, addressing not just the bullies, but the entire crowd. "Because I thought violence was never the answer. Because I thought if I just endured it, you'd eventually get bored and move on. But I was wrong about one thing. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't violence. It's justice." He looked directly at Brady. "You choked me unconscious. You've tormented me for months. You've made my life miserable because you could, because it made you feel powerful. Well, now you know the truth. You were never powerful. You were just picking on someone who chose not to fight back. That choice is over now." Principal Martinez finally pushed through the crowd, her voice sharp with authority. "Everyone to my office now!" As they walked toward the building, Tobias felt a hand slip into his, Zara's, warm and steady. "That was incredible," she whispered, terrifying but incredible. "I should have done it sooner," he replied. "No," she said firmly. "You did it when you were ready. When you had no other choice. That's what makes you different from them." The aftermath rippled through Westfield Technical Academy like waves from a stone dropped in still water. The video of the confrontation went viral within the school before Principal Martinez could even finish taking statements. Everyone had seen Brady Hutchinson, the untouchable king of the school, completely dismantled by the skinny student he'd been tormenting for months. In the principal's office, the truth came out in pieces. Other students came forward with their own stories of Brady's bullying, emboldened by Tobias's stand. The footage clearly showed Derek initiating the assault, choking Tobias unconscious while Brady encouraged it and Tyler filmed. When Tobias had regained consciousness and defended himself, he'd used only enough force to neutralize the threat, never crossing the line into excessive retaliation. Brady, Derek and Tyler received suspensions and were kicked off the football team, a devastating blow with college scouts scheduled to visit in the coming weeks. More importantly, the social hierarchy that had allowed them to terrorize other students crumbled overnight. Brady couldn't walk down the hallway without hearing whispers, without seeing people film him with their phones, without feeling the weight of his own humiliation. The change in Tobias was even more dramatic, though he handled it with the same quiet dignity he'd always possessed. Students who had never noticed him before nodded in the hallways. The robotics team, which had always appreciated his technical skills but kept their distance socially, now included him in their group chats and weekend hangouts. Teachers looked at him with a mixture of respect and surprise, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. A week after the confrontation, Tobias was working on his robot in the engineering lab when Brady appeared in the doorway. Tobias tensed, his body automatically shifting into a ready stance, but Brady held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm not here to fight," Brady said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. I wanted to say something." Tobias waited, saying nothing. "My dad," Brady started, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "My dad always told me that the world respects strength, that you have to dominate or be dominated. That's how he treats my mom, how he treats me. I thought that's how it was supposed to be." "And now?" Tobias asked. Brady laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Now I know what real strength looks like. It looks like someone who could destroy you but chooses not to. It looks like someone who endures hell because they're trying to be better than their tormentors." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, doesn't undo what I did. But I wanted you to know." Tobias studied him for a long moment. "Apologize to everyone else you've hurt, not just me. And then actually change. That's the only apology that matters." Brady nodded and left without another word. Whether he would follow through remained to be seen, but Tobias had said what needed to be said. Later that evening, Tobias sat with Zara on the bleachers overlooking the football field, watching the team practice without their former stars. The November sun was setting, painting the Iowa sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded him of Bruce's healing. "Do you regret it?" Zara asked, "not fighting back sooner?" Tobias considered the question. "I regret that it came to violence at all, but I think I needed to exhaust every other option first. I needed to know that I'd tried everything else before I resorted to force. Otherwise, I'd just be another bully with better training." "You could never be a bully," Zara said firmly. "Bullies enjoy hurting people. You didn't enjoy a second of that fight." She was right. Even in the moment of victory, standing over his defeated tormentors, Tobias had felt no joy, no satisfaction. Only a tired relief that it was over, that he could finally stop carrying the weight of their cruelty. "My uncle always says that knowing how to fight means you almost never have to," Tobias said. "But sometimes, when someone won't stop attacking you, when they've made it clear they won't respect anything but force, you have to speak their language just once, not to become them, but to show them that their power was always an illusion." Zara leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. "Well, you definitely showed them. The whole school's still talking about it. You're kind of a legend now." "I don't want to be a legend," Tobias said. "I just want to work on my robots and go to class without being afraid." "And now you can," Zara pointed out. "That's what standing up for yourself gives you. Not fame or fear from others, but freedom to just be yourself." As they sat there, watching the sun set over the cornfields that surrounded Westfield, other students began joining them on the bleachers. Not the popular crowd, not the athletes or the social elite, but the quiet ones, the different ones, the ones who had also been targets. They didn't say much, just nodded at Tobias and found their own spots to sit, but their presence said everything. They had seen someone like them refuse to be a victim, and it had changed something fundamental in how they saw themselves. Marcus Holloway, a freshman who Brady had been starting to target before the confrontation, worked up the courage to speak. "Hey, Tobias, could you maybe teach some of us? Not to hurt people, but just to, be able to protect ourselves?" Tobias looked at the growing group of students, all of them bearing the invisible scars of bullying, all of them looking at him with hope. "I'll talk to my uncle," he said finally. "Maybe we can set something up at his gym. But if we do this, we do it right. It's not about fighting, it's about confidence, discipline, and knowing that you have the ability to defend yourself if you absolutely have to." The group murmured agreement, and Tobias found himself at the center of something he'd never expected, a community of people who understood that real strength wasn't about domination, but about protection, not about breaking others down, but about building yourself up. Principal Martinez had implemented new anti-bullying policies in the wake of the incident, but Tobias knew the real change went deeper than rules and suspensions. It was in the way students looked at each other now, the way bystanders were more likely to speak up, the way the social dynamics had shifted to make cruelty less acceptable. One person standing up had created a ripple effect, showing others that they could stand up too. A month later, Tobias stood in his uncle's gym, teaching basic self-defense to a group of 20 students from Westfield. Brady was there too, to everyone's surprise, working with genuine humility to learn proper technique. Instead of relying on size and aggression, he partnered with Marcus, the freshman he had once tormented, showing him how to break a grip with patience that would have been unthinkable before. "Remember," Tobias called out to the group, echoing his uncle's words, "the goal is never to hurt someone. The goal is to get home safe. Every technique you learn is a last resort, something you use only when every other option has failed." As he watched his classmates practice, some coordinated, others clumsy, all determined, Tobias thought about the journey that had brought them here. He had been pushed to his breaking point, forced to use violence to stop violence, but in doing so, he had somehow created more peace than years of endurance ever had. Zara caught his eye from across the gym where she was practicing with another student and smiled. She had been right that day on the bleachers. Standing up for yourself didn't make you a legend or a hero. It just gave you the freedom to be yourself without fear. And sometimes that freedom was contagious, spreading to others who needed to see that bullies only had the power you allowed them to have. The story of the quiet student who had turned the tables on his tormentors became part of Westfield's folklore, told to incoming students as both a warning and an inspiration. But for Tobias, it was simpler than that. He had learned that there was a time for patience and a time for action, a time for turning the other cheek and a time for standing your ground. The wisdom was in knowing the difference, and the courage was in acting when the moment came. As the session ended and students began filtering out, talking and laughing in groups that would have never existed before, Tobias realized that the confrontation in the parking lot hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning, not of violence or revenge, but of understanding that sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is show those who prey on perceived weakness that their entire worldview is built on sand. Standing up to Brady hadn't made Tobias a different person. It had simply revealed who he had always been, someone strong enough to endure, wise enough to show restraint, and brave enough to act when restraint was no longer the answer. The bullies had thought they were teaching him his place in the social hierarchy. Instead, they had taught him, and everyone watching, that hierarchies built on cruelty were as fragile as glass, waiting for someone with the courage to show everyone just how easily they could shatter. The gym lights dimmed as the last student left, and Tobias began putting away the practice mats. His uncle appeared from the office, pride evident in his weathered face. "You did good, nephew," he said simply. "Not just in defending yourself, but in what you've done since. Building instead of tearing down, that's the mark of a true warrior." Tobias nodded, feeling the truth of those words. He had won more than a fight in that parking lot. He had won the right to define himself on his own terms, to be more than either victim or victor. He had learned that sometimes the greatest strength was in knowing when to use your power, and the greatest victory was in helping others find their own. As he walked home through the Iowa night, past the cornfields and under stars that seemed especially bright, Tobias carried with him the knowledge that he had faced his worst fear and emerged not as a fighter, but as someone who understood that true strength came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, from showing mercy when you held all the power, and from building others up rather than tearing them down. The bullies had taught him how not to be. His response had taught everyone else how to become something better.